My name is Elliot Witt. I am the Assistant Manager of Digital Services here at the Aurora Public Library District. One of my favorite things about my job is that we don't only deal with technology, we don't only deal with computers, but we get to deal with science too. Science is a big passion of mine. It has been ever since I was a kid reading books about dinosaurs. And animals in particular are something which are very near and dear to my heart. So that is why I wanted to give you just kind of a quick overview of some of the things that I find the most interesting about intelligence in the animals who we share our planet Earth with. Because there are a lot of big ideas in science fiction, in science fact. I'm by no means an expert, but I can direct you to further reading from people who actually are. And I think it'll be pretty fun tonight. I've got a few good videos from some of the experts and a few fun things that maybe you can do at home as well. So without further ado, we are going to get started with measuring animal intelligence. And I shall share my screen. One more quick note, both for those of you on Zoom and for those of you on Facebook Live, since this is live streamed there as well. If you have a question during the presentation, you can ask that in the chat, both here on Zoom and on Facebook. On Zoom, I should see it pretty quickly. If you're on Facebook, it might take me a few minutes, but I promise I'm going to check it at least a couple of times throughout the presentation. All right, without further ado, you've heard me talk enough for the time being, so time to hear me talk a little bit more. This is measuring animal intelligence. So the first thing I wanted to discuss were different theories of intelligence. If we're going to get to animals and how intelligent they are, it's probably a good idea to first discuss how we measure intelligence in human beings. And the whole process is kind of complicated by the fact that there is not one accepted standard that this is what is intelligent and this is what is not. There are a lot of different competing theories. And so you get some scientific papers. One that I read said people with higher general intelligence learn faster, which makes sense, but learning what and what is general intelligence and how does it relate to different kinds of intelligence? So I have picked out a few different theories that I thought were interesting and sort of diverse and unique from each other to talk to you about. So the theory of multiple intelligence, that was created by someone named Howard Gardner. And it basically stipulates that intelligence is not a singular monolithic idea, or it's not a singular monolithic thing that can be tested in one particular way, but instead that there are all sorts of many different ways to measure intelligence. These can include mathematical, linguistic, spatial, musical, even communicative, person to person. This is a theory which has a lot of traction, just kind of from a layman's perspective. And I think that there is a lot of validity to it because everyone is good at something. I know as much as I love science, I was never really one who could grasp like complex physics or chemistry very well. But I was really good with history and language. And my brother was kind of the opposite. I mean, he was good at history and language too, but math was where he really shined and the physics came along with it. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. It is kind of a feel-good theory. So the thing about the theory of multiple intelligences is that it can't really be tested or verified it's more about celebrating uniqueness rather than like actually finding the concrete statistical differences in mental capacity or mental performance between different people. So that's the criticism of that theory. Even so, there might be some truth to any one of these theories or all of these theories. The triarchic theory of intelligence is kind of a halfway point between the idea that there's just one way to be intelligent and the multiple intelligences. This proposes a three-pronged approach of analytical, creative, and practical intelligence. And this was created by a man named Robert Sternberg. So analytical intelligence is basically the kind of intelligence we think of when we hear that word. It's knowledge, it's the application of that knowledge, it's the ability to learn. Creative intelligence is the ability to adapt to new situations and new challenges. And practical intelligence is really embedded in kind of your socio-cultural milieu is actually the word that my source here uses. But basically, it's adapting to your environment and affecting your environment to better fit into it. So those are the three prongs of the triarchic theory of intelligence, which is by no means universally accepted. Then Piaget's theory of intelligence, and forgive me, I'm not really a French speaker. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This was a gentleman named Jean Piaget. And this really deals primarily with development. So this is the development over the course of a child's life from birth to about 16 years old. And there are different stages that child goes through. There's the sensory motor stage until 2 years old, the pre-operational stage 2 to 7, concrete operational 7 to 11, and formal operations 11 to 16. And there are a lot of very interesting things about all of these stages. Essentially, the sensory motor stage up until 2 years old is when the child can only react to things that they are experiencing with their senses. Pre-operational, they need something concrete to visualize and latch onto. And then the concrete operational and formal operation stages are really when abstract thought starts to appear. So, having said all of this, there are some ways that we can apply this to animal intelligence. Because this whole debate in human intelligence of, academic is how we measure it. No, we have to accept, creative intelligence and linguistic and all of this. That is largely because different cultures and even different individuals have different ways of expressing their intelligence. And the same is true of animals. Animal senses can be very different, both from each other and from our own senses. And the way that animals interact with their world can be different based on a variety of factors, including things like how large they are and where they fit into the food web, whether they're generally predator or generally prey, because they are also a product of their environment, the same as we can be. And so if one particular type of learning is really important, that is what that animal's brain is going to prioritize. We'll get more into all of this in just a minute. So one way that we measure intelligence is through intelligence tests or IQ tests. And these can be problematic. But here is some of the basic information about an intelligence test. So it can test things such as working memory, arithmetic ability, spatial ability, and general knowledge about the world. And So now let's talk a little bit about general versus specific knowledge. So general knowledge is, to make a long story short, your general ability to learn and to adapt and to remember things and to apply all of that to problem solving. Specific intelligence is going to help you in specialized situations, solving specific problems. Specific intelligences would be things like the multiple intelligences in the theory that I mentioned on the last slide. So, of course, the IQ test is one of our most common intelligence tests, and that is a way of calculating a number which says how intelligent someone is. One very simplified way of looking at it is that you take the mental age, and this is generally for children, the mental age divided by the chronological age times 100. So if a 10-year-old scores about as well as the average 10-year-old, that's 10 divided by 10, which is 1, times 100. If that 10-year-old scores as well as the average 20-year-old, that's 20 divided by 10, which is 2, times 100. And so that would be 200, and their IQ would be 200. This is simplified, but that is generally how it works. There are a lot of problems with these when we're testing humans. So cultural norms can vary from place to place. And so what seems like it's fair to you might not be fair to me. And what seems like it's fair to me might not be fair to you. I have an example from an actual IQ test up on the screen here. And so you can see under general information, they've got what day of the year is Independence Day? Well, in the United States, it's the 4th of July. In other countries like Canada, it's the 1st of July is Canada Day. And you might be able to figure it out based on the context, but that's just one example. And right off the bat, there are other examples on this sheet, like why do people buy fire insurance? I don't know exactly what age this is targeted towards, but if that question has no further context and I'm like an 8-year-old taking this, I might not know what fire insurance is. And so there can be a lot of issues, and even the language that it's written in, which, believe it or not, actually can apply to animals as well in a way. So, with all of that, IQ tests are not perfect. And so no test that we give an animal is going to be perfect either. But let's take a look at just like what are we actually testing? So these are just a few of this is by no means like the be all end all. These are basically things which I pulled from several different sources. I could have listed 20 more, some more general, some more niche, but basically, if we are talking animal intelligence, we could be testing their working memory, problem solving, self-recognition or awareness, abstract thought, pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, their street smarts, or their just general knowledge. There are a lot of different ways that we go about this. So it's important to keep in mind, and this might sound like I am hewing pretty close to the line of the theory of multiple intelligences, which maybe I am. It's important to remember that no single test is going to capture every single different aspect of intelligence. So let's talk about some ways which animals commonly demonstrate their intelligence. So one of the ones which we will most commonly see are going to be animals which we have trained to perform a certain task within human society. So that can include detection dogs, and that is the picture that I do happen to have on the screen of an adorable, I believe that's a retriever. I think that's a Labrador based on the short coat. And so these dogs can detect explosives, drugs, living humans, deceased humans. They can indicate the presence of diabetes or cancer, or more recently, COVID-19. And they can also detect laptops, smartphones, SIM cards, all sorts of artificial pieces of technology. It is really incredible what these dogs' noses can do. Um, as far as the COVID-19 goes, by the way, studies in Australia suggested that the dogs can actually detect it better than like the nose swab or the cheek swab tests. So that is pretty darn impressive. And I am a dog person. And so that makes me feel really good. That makes me feel really happy that these dogs are able to perform such a vital service. But they aren't the only ones. The Navy Marine Mammal Program is a program which has gone on since 1960. And that is the United States Navy training primarily dolphins, but also sea lions in order to perform military tasks. So dolphins have incredibly advanced biological sonar, which allows them to basically map out their surroundings underwater. And it is so specific and so fine-tuned that it can detect different types of material. It can detect living things. It can detect different types of metal. They can differentiate one type of metal or one thing made out of one type of metal from another. They have actually been used during war to detect enemy divers who might be attempting to sabotage or otherwise damage military ships. They can also locate mines. These dolphins can locate mines underneath the ocean surface and can drop a transponder that their handler gives them in order to flag its location. This is a really incredible display of intelligence, in my opinion. The fact that they can perform such an intricate task over such a wide area. But they aren't alone in that. As we will see right about now, there are a lot of different animals which have displayed a lot of different types of intelligence. So we talked a little bit about the way that animals interact with humans in ways that we deem intelligent, but let's talk about animals in the wild and how intelligent they can be. So one thing that I wanted to mention was termite fishing. And if you don't know what termite fishing is, you can find videos of it. I don't have a video in this presentation, but let me explain what it is to you. So it was discovered 60 years ago by Jane Goodall, the famous primatologist, and it was the first demonstrated use of tools in the wild by animals. So what the chimpanzee basically does is this is a way that they harvest food. They are going to take a stick, they're going to bite on the stick or scrape at the stick or otherwise adjust it to their liking. And then they use it to insert it into a termite mound or an ant hill in order to pull some of the insects out on the stick and then eat them up for nourishment. So this is not the only animal tool use in the wild anymore, but it is the first and most well accounted for tool use. And it's also interesting because just recently, about the last 5 to 10 years, primatologists studying chimpanzees in the wild have found out that they can actually termite fish in different ways depending on what group they're a part of. So it actually demonstrates cultural diversity, which suggests that the chimpanzees within a band or a tribe are passing down their specialized knowledge to the younger chimpanzees. They'll sit in a different position to fish, or they will use different types of sticks, either a very soft, bendy stick or a very rigid, hard stick. And so I just find it fascinating. Tool use is one of those things which you see as a hallmark of human civilization, but chimpanzees do it too. And that is an indicator, just kind of off topic here, of, how close we can really be to the animal kingdom. Chimpanzees are our closest living relatives in the great tree of life. And so it makes sense that they would be able to use tools if we can. But like I said, they are not the only ones who can use tools. I believe crows can as well, although what I want to talk to you about in terms of crows are their amazing memories. So crows really cannot forget a face, and a human face. Sometimes I have trouble recognizing my coworkers when they walk in the door after a long weekend. But crows not only can remember other crows, but can remember human beings, and specific human beings. They can remember your face. They can remember the car that you drive. They can remember your pet. And they can remember whether you were nice to them or mean to them. And it's not unheard of for a crow to bring gifts or trinkets to a human who has fed them in the past, sometimes even months later. Those crows will also transfer that knowledge to other crows living with them in the surrounding area. So if you feed one crow, multiple crows might bring you gifts because they recognize you as a nice human. They can also hold a grudge. They can also be very nasty towards humans who are nasty towards them. So you might want to think about making sure you're extra nice to your local crows. Why can they remember so well? It's because they have enlarged forebrains, which can process analytical thought at a level that is just about equal, maybe just slightly under that of primates. So that enlarged forebrain is a hallmark of primates as well as of crows. And then I wanted to talk about this elephant. So this elephant's name, let me just pull it up so that I know that I am not, Kandula. It's right on the screen here. I don't need to pull it up on my other screen. Kandula was an elephant who they, in the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., and they decided to give him an intelligence test. And so the way that they did that is they put tasty leaves and fruit at a very high level away from him, and basically just let him figure out how to get to it. So he had, after a few days of this testing with the height of the food being changed, he had a bit of an aha moment. And so I'm just going to share that with you right now. It's not a high quality video, so I'm just going to play it at this small size. And I'll just let it go. There isn't any volume on this one either, so don't worry about that. So the food is up right in the top left corner of the screen. That bright patch of green is the food. So that was not a behavior which Candula, the elephant, was taught. He had played with that cube before, used it in other ways, but this was the first time he had ever used that cube as basically a step stool. This is pretty rare in the animal kingdom for an animal to be able to problem solve really without a clue from their human handlers or their the human researchers who are working with them. And after he did it once, he continued to do that again and again and again. So he had this aha moment, this eureka moment. And from then on, he had this newly acquired skill of using not only that cube, but also containers of different types as a step stool. So just a couple of things about the way we kind of guess that an animal is going to be intelligent. So one of the ways, which has always been a way that people guess at intelligence, is a big brain, a physically large brain. This was something which was kind of discredited in humans, where long in the past researchers would actually measure the size of the head and determine that, oh, your head is bigger, which means your brain is bigger, which means you are more intelligent. That is not accurate. As a general rule, animals with larger brains will be more intelligent than animals with smaller brains. However, it is more important for the brain to be large relative to the size of the animal's body. So a very small animal, which has a brain which takes up 10% of its body weight, and I'm making up these numbers, that animal could very well be smarter than an animal which is 10 feet tall with a brain which makes up 1% of its body weight. It's all about how they use that brain. But even then, that is not the be all end all. We're going to talk about some animals which are very small, which have very small brains, which are very intelligent. And I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. As far as individual animals being tested for intelligence, there is nature and nurture, and there's a little bit of both. An animal's genetic makeup will determine roughly how intelligent it is going to be. But like humans, they can be affected by their environment. And so the culture of the group that they live in can affect it, as well as the resources, whether they live in a zoo or in the wild. There are all sorts of factors, and that's going to change how a particular animal passes or fails, or what results they get on an intelligence test. So now that we're about halfway through here, I wanted to show you some specific intelligence tests which have been given to animals, and these video clips will have sound. So if you cannot hear the sound when I play them, please do send me a chat, but I think they should have it. So this first one is from the BBC, and this is about testing chimpanzees' working memory.
The scientists at Japan's Primate Research Institute, the PRI, where Ayumu is based, have devised intelligence tests for chimps. One test is for what's called working memory, the brain's ability to temporarily store and use information. The numbers 1 to 9 are randomly scattered across a touchscreen. The chimp looks at them for as long as is needed to memorize the layout. Then, as soon as 1 is touched, the other numbers are hidden and must now be remembered. We volunteered Chris, the director of this program, to demonstrate this test. He's a college graduate and a crossword addict, but how good is his working memory? When Chris reckons he has memorized the layout, he touches 1. When the others are hidden, he must try to recall 2 to 9 in ascending order.
It takes me ages to remember where they're all placed, and then I think I've got it. It's really very, very difficult.
In 30 attempts, Chris only once reached 9 without making a mistake.
As soon as they're blanked over, It's like my mind's been blanked over as well.
When Ayumu sat the same test, he correctly remembered the numbers almost 90% of the time.
Ayumu gets it right almost every time, and I've got it right once.
Chris fears he's let his species down. But even when the PRI played Ayumu against their best human students, who were given regular practice sessions, Ayumu still beat all humans. Other chimps at the PRI have also sat the exams. Among these apes, computer skills are as normal as the ability to swing from the trees. Though none of his rivals beat Ayumu, a few came close, and average chimp results turned out to be higher than amongst humans. So, does that efficient working memory mean chimps are cleverer than humans? We tracked down a scientist who studies chimps in the wild, Dr. Nick Newton-Fisher.
I think it's interesting the results that suggest that chimps may have particular cognitive abilities that are different and maybe in some aspects better than humans, because chimpanzees are not small primitive furry humans. They are a species that we share a common ancestor with maybe 5 or 6 million years ago, but they've evolved along their own individual path. They're better at doing chimp things and we're better at doing human things. And some chimp things may not simply be climbing up and down trees and eating figs. Some of those chimp things might be mental abilities as well.
That's chimps 1, humans 0.
So I just, find it, really, fascinating to see just how fast the chimpanzees can complete those tasks. And that's going to be one of the primary ways which these tests are run, is basically by putting a screen of one sort or another in front of an animal and either having it, and essentially having it interact with that screen. There are a couple of different ways to do it, and actually the next example, the next example will be a screen. The example after that will be slightly different. In terms of chimpanzees, since they are our closest relatives, it's no wonder that they are one of the most intelligent of animal species. Generally, a chimpanzee is acknowledged as being about as intelligent as a 2 to 5 year old human being. And if a human child and a chimpanzee child are taught together and taught the same things in the same way, for the first couple of years of their life, both children will exhibit very similar, ways of learning. That harkens back to the Piaget's sensory motor stage, where as long as they're interacting with their environment, the chimpanzee is just as intelligent as the human. It is later when abstract thought and logical reasoning come into play where humans then gain a slight advantage. And by the way, of course, one thing which I actually don't really cover very much here in this presentation is language, just because it's so difficult. There are apes, great apes like Coco the gorilla, who learned hundreds of different hand signs. But you don't really hear about animals talking, and when you do, it's like a parrot, which is more of a parlor trick than genuine intelligence. Not to say that they're not intelligent, it still is quite a skill to learn all of those different, words and phrases, but there isn't meaning behind it the way there might be with an ape. Unfortunately, with chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, and orangutans, their vocal cords are not developed the way ours are. And so that is why you don't see anyone teaching an ape how to speak, because they physically are incapable of doing it. That's why they teach them sign language, and they can express some very interesting ideas. I know Coco the gorilla painted pictures and named those pictures, things like Spot Run and Blue Ball. There has been a suggestion, and I don't know if this was verified. So if you're interested in this, please research it for yourself. I believe there have even been instances of gorillas who were taught sign language actually describing things which happened to them many years ago in the wild before they were brought to a zoo or a sanctuary. Years later, after they had been taught sign language in the interim, they were able to express things like being taken out of the wild, which is very, very fascinating to me. Let's go on to another type of intelligence test for animals. The mirror test. So this is the big one. This one is actually the biggest, I shouldn't say the biggest. This is one of the most common tests which can be applied to animals of almost any species. And it tests their ability for self-recognition, right? So the last test, that was the chimp's working memory. This is their self-recognition. So this is a more abstract concept rather than just rote memorization of here are all the locations of things. This is, can the animal recognize itself in the mirror? And so far, this has been passed by 9 species, including some which were only verified pretty recently. The test was developed by Gordon Gallup Jr. in 1970 and involves surreptitiously marking an animal's body with some sort of paint that is non-toxic, that is scentless, that is feelingless, so they aren't going to know it's there unless they see it. And it's somewhere on their body, like on their forehead or their head, which they, or their nose, cheeks, which they can't see without the help of a mirror. And so the 9 species which have passed this test are Asian elephants, bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas. Those are all of the great apes, all of our closest relatives. Bottlenose dolphins, orca whales, Eurasian magpies, which are a bird that is closely related to the crow, and ants. And the ants one is a little controversial. From what my reading suggested, not everyone agrees that the ants really passed the test. However, they did verify that an ant, when confronted with a mirror, would act differently than an ant which was confronted with a clear pane of glass with other ants on the other side, which is generally what the animals which don't pass the mirror test believe a mirror is. They believe that a mirror is a pane of glass with another animal on the other side. And so they will react either violently or in friendly fashion to the animal in the mirror. So I have a video clip for this one as well.
I used to put my cat up to the mirror and it would just ignore itself. But some cats, they freak out. So what's up with mirrors? Why do they make some animals go crazy? Hey there, cool cats. Trace here for D-News. Thanks for watching. Mirrors show us what we look like, but they are not perfect. Our right is our left is our right, and if you're trying to manipulate something using a mirror, it can get really confusing really fast. And you can see what happens when you show one to a chimpanzee in this YouTube video captured by French wildlife experts Anne-Marie and Xavier Hubert-Briere. Usually when an animal sees its own reflection, it lashes out aggressively or withdraws in fear because it thinks it's another animal. We know that the chimps don't understand what they're seeing as a reflection because in 1970, Gordon Gallup Jr. created a self-awareness test called the mirror test. If you secretly put a bit of dye or paint onto an animal's face and then it sees a reflection, self-aware animals will go right for the paint, poking it and touching it. Non-self-aware animals won't. It's a simple enough test that's been replicated many, many times. The idea is marking the body is testing the theory of mind, or ability to imagine what others are thinking and feeling separate from yourself. The reason animals don't recognize themselves, say scientists, is because they don't have high levels of self-awareness. We can watch as human babies develop this self-awareness too. Young babies love to look at mirrors, but they have no idea that that other baby isn't a stranger until they're like 15 to 18 months old. And then, if there's a mark on their face, they will touch a finger to it, showing they understand it is their own reflection and not some other baby. Eventually, chimps figure this out too and will begin exploring the mirror, looking at their tongue, flopping their arms around and making odd body motions. Animal psychologist Diana Rice calls this the Groucho stage. But eventually, once they understand what the reflection is, they'll use it to see parts of their body that are normally invisible to them, like their back. Scientists keep testing animals in this way, and so far only bonobos, orangutans, dolphins, orcas, elephants, humans, magpies, and possibly pigeons have passed the mirror test. Interestingly, gorillas don't, leopards don't, fish don't either, and most birds will simply just attack their own reflections. Gibbons and macaques gesture at their face, indicating that they understand something weird is going on, but they don't fully recognize the truth. Dogs spend a little while trying to attack or play with the other dog before giving up and ignoring their reflection altogether, and cats have never passed either. Some scientists say that the pass of a mirror test means the animal understands self-awareness. But that's problematic. Non-Western children don't pass the mirror test, even by the age of 6. Studies with Kenyan children show that they can become very uncomfortable when put in front of the mirror, indicating they understand self-awareness. But lead researcher Tanya Broche believes that they don't fully pass because their society values being part of a larger social group rather than individuality. Self-awareness might be a continuum and not a hard and fast line, say animal researchers. So next time you're asking your mirror, mirror, who is the fairest, just make sure that you give animals a fair shake too. It's important to note, not all animals value sight as much as we do. Elephants in the wild will pass the mirror test only about half of the time, even though we believe they're self-aware. This may be because they use sound, touch, and scent for identification over sight. One thing is for sure, however, any videos of animals and babies seeing their reflection are just golden. If you wanted to start a website where you could...
So I think they really hit the nail on the head there, in that there are cultural differences in the way humans can perform on IQ tests, on intelligence tests, and so too are there differences for animals. If they do not rely on their sense of sight, they might fail the mirror test even if they are self-aware. Or it's possible that the animals just aren't interested. That video, mentioned a slightly different list of animals than the list that I gave to you. I think the video is a few years old, and I think the list I gave to you is slightly more up to date in terms of some of the latest scientific discoveries on which animals can pass the mirror test. But there's also a question between scientists, so it's possible that they're going from one scientist's perspective, and the list I drew from is going from another's. So I've got one more video here, and it hits on yet another type of intelligence, which is problem solving. And crows are ferociously intelligent birds. We talked about their memories. So let's see that memory in action.
The meat is positioned so deep in the narrow box, it's out of reach of the crow's beak. But Alex has positioned a number of other objects nearby. The question is, can 007 use the tools available to solve the puzzle?
Imagine that you're a crow. Here's your food in a deep hole. How would you go about, with the tools available to you on this table, solving this problem?
The bird's toolkit includes a short stick hanging on a piece of string, 3 stones inside wooden cages, and a longer stick trapped in a plastic box. First, the crow must use the short stick to get the stones, and then use all 3 stones to get the long stick.
And now the crows can take this and probe it into the hole and roll, much better than I can, the food out of the hole and get themselves a nice, tasty reward.
It's a complicated task. The crow is familiar with the individual pieces of the puzzle. He's done each of them separately for a food reward. But this is the first time he's seen them arranged like this. 8 separate stages that must be completed in a particular order if the puzzle is to be solved. If the bird succeeds, it'll be a world first. He takes time to have a look. And then starts with the short stick. He finds it too short to reach the food. He then sets off to get the first stone. Got it. But he doesn't seem to know what to do with it. And another. He appears to be stuck. But now something seems to click. He dispatches the first stone. Then returns to collect the last one. Got it. The final stage. Success. 8 individual stages complete. The crow performed all 8 tasks in the correct order.
So that's just another really cool one. So, that crow had been taught all of those individual components before, but had to put them all together. And of course, it's very significant tool use, not in the wild, but it's tool use that was acquired from humans. But I think that is still pretty cool. So that is most of what I have in terms of just giving you kind of an overview of how animal intelligence can be tested. But before I get to the end of the presentation, I wanted to give you a little something that you could even do at home. And they are intelligence tests for your dog. So take this, kind of with a grain of salt. Any very quick intelligence test that you can do at home is not going to be particularly conclusive. But I thought this was still fun. So I got this from today.com, like the Today Show. And they had several different tests where they had kind of a point scoring system. And I did at least one with my own dog. She's a golden retriever and her name is Darby. She's on the left side of the screen right after taking what they call the towel test. So that one, and here I'll describe it for you now. So if you want to do this test at home, you can either write it down now or you can always go back on Facebook and just rewind as I'm describing it, or search for today.com dog IQ test. So the towel test, you take a large towel or blanket and you put it over your dog's head. And then you time how long it takes your dog to escape from underneath the towel. So their suggested point system is if it takes less than 15 seconds, you give them 3 points. 15 to 30 seconds is 2, and longer than 30 seconds is 1 point. Since my dog did the test, I will say that she got her head out from underneath the towel in 13 seconds, which would get her 3 points if that counts. However, as you can see, she then kind of decided to wear it as a toga for a while, and it took her a couple of minutes after that to actually fully shrug the towel off. But I gave her the 3 points anyway, because she's very cute. Another test is the shell game, essentially, which we all know is kind of an old carnival trick where you put one object underneath a cup or a shell. There are 3 identical shells. You swing them around, mix them up, and then ask where is the hidden object. In this case, you can use a dog treat, put it underneath one of the shells or buckets or cups, shuffle them around without your dog looking, and then give them the opportunity to find the treat. And if they get it on the first try, it's 3 points. 2 tries is 2 points. And if you need all 3 tries, that is 1 point. And then the last of the puzzles that I wanted to share, although they had a couple more on top of this, is the chair puzzle, which is placing a treat underneath a table or chair low enough so that they can only fit their paw through and not their head. And then you time how long, or you kind of keep an eye on how long it takes them to figure it out. If they can reach through with their paw in under a minute, that is 3 points. If they use their paws and nose, that is 2 points. And if they give up, that is 1 point. So I just had some fun with this, seeing how my dog did. We've done things like the shell game before where she actually has been fooled by magic tricks with her favorite ball. So I can hold the ball in one hand and put it behind my back and then have empty hands coming out, and then she'll look around frantically because she doesn't know where the ball went. So that's just kind of a funny way to test the intelligence there. It's essentially a magic trick. So the last thing that I have for you are a couple of ways to find more information. If you want to find pure information on animal intelligence and cognition, animal thought, I highly recommend animalcognition.org. They have all sorts of articles which were written by researchers and science writers. My other link here is a little bit different. The Non-Human Rights Project is, full disclosure, it is a nonprofit which I donate to, and it's got the very kind of provocative idea of if animals are intelligent, then perhaps they're deserving of fundamental rights or civil rights, not necessarily on the same level as human beings, but at least the rights to, a comfortable existence. So they basically do litigation for animals who are being mistreated. So if that is the sort of thing which interests you, even just on an academic level, I do recommend checking them out. They have some very interesting content as well. And so that is all for measuring animal intelligence. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I wanted to shout out our upcoming tech workshops. We have many of them, but 2 of the highlights are going to be Hacked, how computer hacking works, and how to protect yourself. That is with our friends from APS Training Academy right here in Aurora. That will be live and in person on Saturday, April 23rd from 2 to 3 p.m., but also available via Zoom. So you can sign up through aurorapubliclibrary.org, and reading ebooks with Overdrive and Libby, which will be starring yours truly, will happen on Thursday, May 5th from 6 to 7 p.m. And finally, because I know we're running out of time, if you would be willing to fill out our survey, it is by no means required. It's not required for Zoom, not required for Facebook, but if you would be willing to do it, it helps me out. It helps me know what I did well, what I could work on, what you might be interested in the future. this is the link right here, and I will actually, if I can, I will in a moment copy the link into the Zoom chat. And finally, are there any questions or comments on Zoom or on Facebook? And thank you, I do see your comment. I'm glad that you found it interesting. I do too, so I really appreciate you sticking around with me. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to paste that link in the Zoom chat just in case. For those of you on Facebook, please feel free to just rewind the video. But that's going to do it for measuring animal intelligence. Thank you so much for going with me on this kind of journey through the animal mind. I really only scratched the surface, so I highly recommend delving in yourself and looking it up on Google, on YouTube. There are all sorts of videos. There are a dozen videos which I didn't get to put in this. So that will do it. Have a great night. Have a great rest of your week and your weekend. And I hope to see you here at the Aurora Public Library District real soon.